like, I mean, it's just the same with Isaiah. It's evidently clear they have not read these passages. They have not read scholarly commentators. They have just found these verses here and there, and then they jump to conclusions without reading the context. I did a short little video responding to some guy trying to say there was a prophecy of Muhammad in Isaiah 29, verse 12. If he would have just read verse 11, he would have seen it. He's taking it out of context.
We should probably do an entire live stream going through Isaiah 42, because once you look up all these things that are being said and you find them elsewhere in the book of Isaiah and they are referring to the Messiah, then it starts becoming very clear.
You can find them in even the prior chapter. Like the language almost repeats. It's like, guys, you didn't read it. You didn't read 2nd Isaiah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We will carry on commenting on the disastrous interview that this guy, Inspiring Stupidity, who calls himself Inspiring Philosophy, had with the cross-dresser David Wood. In the clip we just watched, they are laughing at Muslims who say that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is prophesied in the book of Isaiah. And the argument they are making is this: Muslims do not read the full chapter. If only they read the full chapter, they would never reach the conclusion that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is prophesied in Isaiah. If only they read a verse before or a chapter before, they would realize how stupid their argument is. And let's look at the reaction of the cross-dresser to what this guy, Inspiring Stupidity, just said.
Verse 12. If he would have just read verse 11, he would have seen it. He's taking it out of context.
Here the cross-dresser seems to be very excited and fully in agreement with Inspiring Stupidity. Now, you know what we are going to do, right? We are going to apply the same criteria that they set to their religion. Something these idiots never expect. And now they will realize that they are shooting themselves in the foot. Because for us Muslims, we don't care if Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is prophesied in the Bible or not, because to us this Bible is corrupted. So if all the prophecies of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the Bible are debunked, that wouldn't falsify Islam, because we don't believe that this Bible is preserved. Who believes that the Bible is preserved? Christians. So if all the prophecies of Jesus in the Old Testament are debunked, then Christianity is debunked. Now we will apply the same criteria they set, which is read the chapter before, read the chapter after, don't take the chapter out of context. Now tell me, what is the most obvious prophecy of Jesus in the Old Testament according to Christians? You guessed it right, it's Isaiah 53. Michael Brown referred to this as the most compelling messianic prophecy. Now let's do the same. Let's read the chapter before and the chapter after. And since I'm not very knowledgeable on the Bible, I will let someone who knows the Bible, a Jewish rabbi, someone Christians like so much.
So if we begin with Isaiah 41, we are told explicitly in verse 8 and 9 that Israel is God's servant in the singular. Isaiah 43, it's so important. Isaiah 43 verses 10 and 11. Atem edainu Hashem avdi asher bacharti. You are my witnesses, that's plural, declares the Lord. Avdi, my servant, single, the exact same word we find twice in the Isaiah 53 text. Isaiah 44 verse 1. Isaiah 44 verse 21. Isaiah 45 verse 1. You want me to keep going? Isaiah 48 verse 20. Isaiah 49 verse 3. Explicitly, Yeshaya is telling you, I'm using the word Avdi, my servant, and I mean the Bnei Yisrael. Now, it doesn't mean all the Jewish people. It means the faithful, loyal remnant to the God of Israel. As it turns out, what is Isaiah 52 about? Tell me. Isaiah 52 happens to be a chapter, and no Christian disagrees with this. It's clearly there, that describes Klal Yisrael as the victim of persecution. So as it turns out, Isaiah 52 describes Bnei Yisrael who suffers as a result of the persecution of her neighbors, and that God will redeem Klal Yisrael in the sight of all the nations. That's it. Now, what are we going to do further? Let's go to Isaiah 54. Well, what is Isaiah 54 about? Well, we want to know 53, and it's granted if you read Isaiah 53 out of context, of course you're not going to know who it's talking about. I would posit to you that if you read any book, Lahavdil, that has 66 chapters, and you jump to the 53rd, you'd have no clue what it's talking about. What do? We go to Isaiah 54. Who is Isaiah 54 talking about? It's talking about Klal Yisrael, the nation of Israel, in the singular. How is Israel conveyed in Isaiah 54? Klal Yisrael is conveyed as a woman who is barren, who suffers, who endures the suffering of a people, but God redeems from the nations of the world, whose weapons will not succeed against her. And God promises, as the waters in Noah, no weapon formed against Klal Yisrael will succeed. We're supposed to believe the following from the church. Isaiah 52 is talking about Klal Yisrael. The very last word before Isaiah 53, meaning the last word of Isaiah 52, verse 12, is Israel. The last word. Please look it up for yourself. Isaiah 54 is talking about Israel, again, in the singular, who is suffering as a result of the horrible behavior of her enemies, and God redeems Israel. And you are being asked to believe by Christendom, by the church, by the Southern Baptists, by the Roman Catholic Church, by the Greek Orthodox Church, by the Assemblies of God, by Jews for Jesus, that Isaiah 53 is talking about Jesus. That makes sense? Really? Why in churches, when Isaiah 53 is discussed, never is Isaiah 41 discussed? Never.
So, we applied the same criteria the cross-dresser and the inspiring philosophy set. We have applied it to Christianity, and guess what? Christianity was completely and utterly debunked. Because here Rabbi Tovia Singer used the same argument that David Wood and Inspiring Stupidity used. He went to chapters before, chapters after, and he proved that in those chapters Isaiah was talking about Israel. The servant Isaiah was talking about in those chapters was Israel. But now you want to take Isaiah 53 out of its context and claim that it is about Jesus. I didn't make any argument. I am merely applying your criteria. And no problem, I will agree with you on this criteria. Let's say that this criteria debunks any prophecy of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the Bible. It also debunks any prophecy of Jesus in the Bible. If all prophecies of Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in the Bible are debunked, Islam is not falsified. If all prophecies of Jesus are debunked in the Bible, Christianity is falsified. So these hilarious guys worry more about, refuting Muslims, even if that meant destroying their whole religion. And that's all I wanted to say. Thank you so much for watching. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.